Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. You're trapped and forced to listen to us whether you like it or not, but we're happy to be here all the same. I'm Toby, and this is Sarah. We are the co-founders of Bravely, a very different product than the one you just saw demoed. We first worked together almost 10 years ago at the Gilt Group, and at the time one of the fastest growing startups in New York. And I've spent much of my career at the intersection of technology and the real world, thinking about ways that combinations of humans and technology can deliver value to people everywhere. And part of that was at Pager, where we built a platform that served on-demand healthcare to people in urgent healthcare situations. If you were sick, you were hurt, you were having some moment of healthcare need, you could get connected to a distributed network of clinicians, doctors, and nurses through our app to get care. I was at work one day, and I got a phone call from a really good friend of mine who had just had an argument with her boss. She was totally reeling, and like many of us do, called me half to vent and half to figure out what to do next. And I joked on that call, I was like, oh, you need like Pager for HR telemedicine. And the idea really clicked for me. She was reaching outside the walls of her very well-resourced company for help rather than turning to HR or anybody else at her office. And the first person that came to mind was genuinely Sarah. Since we had worked together, we had stayed friends, and Sarah's that person you text or you call when you have something going on at work. Her advice is just always better than everybody else's because she tells you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. So we got together and we were like, how do we build Sarah as a service, a real SaaS company, and get more people access to get more people access to help when they're going through something at work.
So I spent the first 10 years of my career working in HR. I worked for companies like Sirius, Coach, before moving on to Gilt when it was like the hottest thing going. I joined when it was less than 100 employees, and I started and spent my first 9 months there in an HR role before going to our founder and CEO, Kevin Ryan, who I had established a great relationship with, and pitching myself to move over to launch what was our high-end answer to Groupon, Guild City, in a sales role. So it took me a lot of convincing, but he gave me the opportunity, and that business grew very quickly, as did I, and I found myself a few years later as the head of sales responsible for a 65-person sales org and $60 million in revenue. And what was really striking to me is that I had spent the first part of my career focused on employee engagement and all the things that HR does, retention, but I really fundamentally didn't understand the impact until I was running my own business. And what I found was that even though I was on the hook to talk about how my team was performing revenue-wise, and I would always blame it on the marketing team and them not doing their job on the demand side, what it really boiled down to, I found, was that most of the issues on my team, in terms of most of the revenue issues, were correlated to issues on my team, either a manager not running their, not having great relationships with their direct reports, or people just not feeling comfortable going forward. So I made it like my life's mission to focus on that. So when Toby brought this idea up, it just gelled, and here we are today. So how many of you can relate to this? It's not there anymore, but here it is again. So maybe this has happened to you, or you've seen it. I'm pretty sure it's happened to everyone. Something comes up at work, right? And instead of going right to your boss or HR business partner, you don't do anything, or maybe you go and you talk to your significant other, your family and friends about it. And by avoiding that conversation, the problem just continues to grow. Your stress level goes up. You know the jig here. And so this is what we call the conversation gap, when people fail to go forward to talk about whatever they're facing at work. And we feel like this is the biggest problem facing company leaders today. And the reason is because 70% of people report avoiding difficult conversations at work. Again, I'm pretty sure everyone in this room can relate to that. I'm sure there are a lot of people in here right now avoiding that conversation that they need to have either with their boss, their direct report. And so it's costly to the company. Here are some stats around that. But when we don't go forward, our stress levels rise and our productivity declines, and that has an impact on the bottom line. Can you go back to that slide? It's been reported that one single failed conversation costs a company $7,500, and conflict at work, is over $350 billion in costs to companies annually. And this is where Bravely comes in. We connect employees with coaches outside of the workplace for confidential conversations about whatever they're facing in the moments that they need it. So Toby's gonna demo, and I'm gonna hold the mic for him.
So if you see up on the screen, this is a desktop version of our web app. And if I'm an employee who has access to Bravely, it's super easy for me to log in at any time after my company has rolled it out and schedule a session at will. So on the first screen, and what you haven't seen here is that we actually get a lot of information on the employee beforehand that helps us personalize the experience. What function, what team do you work for? Who is your manager? What is your seniority? What is your tenure at the company? Where are you located? And all that metadata can help us personalize the experience throughout the app, behind the scenes and seamless to the end user. So today, I'm here at Bravely because I have a new boss and we're not clicking. And we get people writing paragraphs and paragraphs of information about these situations that they're facing at work. It's emotional, right? It's stressful. But in this case, let's say we're not clicking and she never seems happy. So if I schedule what's next, we show you times for pros that are available on your schedule that are matched to your issue, right? So here we have experts and lots of folks with advanced degrees in conflict resolution, interest-based bargaining, effective communication frameworks, crucial conversation frameworks, and we'll get you to the right person for your seniority and the right level of experience. And if you're maybe early in your career and something that you're going through is a classic bread and butter scenario, we've got a ton of coaches who can help you. If you're a senior leader of an engineering team, navigating the complexities of a dispersed global team on different time zones and communication breakdowns, maybe you need somebody a little more specialized. And that's a big piece of the technology that you're not seeing. So if I schedule the session, it's really straightforward. It tells you when we're going to call you. It recaps exactly what you said in your session. You can edit if you want to, and it's super simple to book. So at my scheduled time, I get a phone call powered by Twilio that from my pro, and the heart of this experience today is really that conversation that takes place over the phone. Back to Sarah.
Great. So Toby just took you through a little bit about our pros, but all of them are HR professionals, certified coaches. We also have this community of corporate ombudsmen that we work with who are amazing. They all, like he said, have advanced degrees and credentials, and then we put them through, as you can imagine, because they're central to our product, a pretty rigorous interviewing and vetting schedule before they actually are on our platform to serve employees. And then just to walk you through a little bit more about what happens inside that session. So the first part, as you can imagine, is all about discovery. That pro is working with the employee to understand their situation, more about that employee. And then from there, we try and help people identify the options that they have. And what we're doing is we're trying to understand what are you trying to avoid? What are you trying to produce? And then we help them lay out the different paths that they could take. And then once they decide what path they're willing to go down, that's when we can be a little bit more candid in our feedback with them. So when we're working through an action plan around okay, you're gonna go forward and have a conversation with your boss, we often ask people to walk me through how you're gonna approach this. And then they're usually full of emotion and anger. And we're how do you think your boss is gonna take what you just said to me in the tone that you said it? And you'd be amazed what happens when you just ask people simple questions like that. So we often role play with them because we find that to be extremely beneficial in preparing for these tough conversations. And then, just honestly, I talk about this all the time, when you combine these things, objective guidance and the total confidentiality that we offer with the research-based methodologies that we base our sessions on, that's where the magic happens. People can actually see outside of themselves and see the situation through a different lens and approach it to produce a positive outcome, not just for themselves, but for the organization at large. And this is just a quote. We've held thousands of sessions at this point. We get feedback all the time, and this is: my session was honestly enlightening. While talking with my pro, I realized that I had totally overlooked things that impacted my perspective on my situation. My pro provided me with a template for conflict resolution that I'll be able to use and reuse. And that's what Bravely does.
So an interesting question here is around the business model. We get companies to buy this and offer it to their employees, and it is free to those employees to use. And HR leaders have really embraced this platform in the last year as something that can solve really critical, expensive problems for them. And this time last year, we had one client with 40 employees who had access to the platform, and we started getting some success with your classic early adopters, a few hundred employees, definitely companies you've heard of here in New York and San Francisco, that in May, Zillow came knocking, and we're live with 4,000 US-based employees for Zillow. We did a successful pilot with Chipotle last summer, and now we're live with all of Chipotle corporate down to the general managers of every Chipotle restaurant in the country. And this fall, we launched with Autodesk, 10,000 employees globally. We're live in the US and expanding next month to the rest of the team internationally. We have found, oh, thank you so much. But why are they buying? It's because this experience, this just-in-time spot coaching solution is designed to drive action and drive behavior change that helps people go forward. 85% of people on the platform say that they go forward and embrace a conversation that they were otherwise avoiding with a direct report, with a peer, with a manager, with HR. They go forward and have that conversation, and they tell us that it was more productive, and they give Bravely some credit for that success. It just, in terms of the ROI for that customer, how they think about the value, this quote from the former head of people at Evernote says it all. If one person stays this year because of Bravely, the platform paid for itself right there. A lot of these costs don't show up on a budget as a line item, but they're super expensive. One more testimonial from Dan, our favorite at Zillow. People are terrified. This is him, and head of HR, who's like the friendliest, kindest guy, talking about how terrified people are to come forward to HR because of the structural limitations of what they can do. And by the time a problem gets to him, it's gone too far. It's festered and it's escalated, as Sarah talked about before. And something we're particularly proud of is how many women, people of color, LGBTQ people, and intersections of those identities we're helping every day navigate tough conversations around not only challenges of performance and everyday conflict with managers, but navigating identity when they're underrepresented in the workplace. And this summer, Fast Company, as part of a Pride Month series, wrote about how we're helping LGBTQ employees navigate often difficult workplaces. What's next? Just a teaser. A lot of our pipeline is huge public companies, CPG, financial institutions, public agencies, and we've quickly shown through a lot of our relationships that Bravely is not just for your classic startup early adopter. We're building new ways to interact with our pros, text-based messaging. There are all sorts of interesting things we can do around data to build the genome of workplace conflict and issues. And we're gearing up for a fundraising round that we're very excited about. So thank you so much for listening to us. Appreciate you having us here. Great, questions?
So I imagine employees would seek outside help when probably they exhausted internal venues, and I imagine they're probably upset at this point. And some of those issues get resolved and some of them don't. And if it kind of escalates further, it becomes a little bit of a conflict, right? You support either on the employee side or on the company side, the legal issues are involved. How do you address that?
Yep. So the question was around how do we address escalating issues when employees have tried to go internally, it's not working, and they come to us, it's borderline legal, and it seems like there could be a conflict of interest with the company buying? Right, so the protocol is really specifically designed to help somebody go forward and have a conversation. We do not offer legal advice. That's where we draw the line. And in those emotionally charged situations, like these are experts who are trained and experienced in taking some of the emotion out of it, asking the right questions. They don't take sides. They don't assume that whoever has come to them is right. They don't assume there is a right to the whole question. So it's mostly coaching with a blend of teaching when it comes to skills-based communication, but it would be really hard for an employee to walk away with the impression that a pro told them what to do, that it encouraged on legal territory, and that it wasn't helpful in fueling some sort of future interaction at the company.
I would just add to that in cases where there's something really sensitive and someone hasn't reported it yet, we do offer what we call anonymous escalation. So they can, in fact, send something up to the chief people officer where they don't have to reveal their identity. It's not an official reporting mechanism, but it does give them the opportunity to get eyes on a situation. I always use the example of like a single mother who can't lose her job and needs to get some relief from the stress that she's feeling every day.
Who have you found to be the most effective buyers and decision makers of your product, and how have you responded to people if this question has come up? If they've said something like, well, I would prefer these conversations aren't given light to begin with.
We hear that. We heard that a lot in the beginning,
Just
right?
to repeat the question
Yeah,
really
sorry.
quickly.
Who's our buyer, right? And then what do we do when we hear that our potential buyers say, like, well, we don't want these conversations to even come to light? So our buyer is the chief people officer. Even if we enter a company through the CEO, like more often than not, they then pass us on to that chief people officer, or chief HR officer, someone in the people function. The companies that we've been partnering with, they're, Zillow's on Best Places to Work every year. It takes a forward-thinking leader to implement something like Bravely. Like, we're always going to hear exactly what you're saying from someone, because when you live in that fear-based approach, it usually shows up in your culture. And honestly, like, it's not surprising. It actually was surprising for us, but some of the companies that we've read about who you would think would be dying for something like Bravely, they're the ones who are saying to us, we don't need this, this isn't gonna work here. And so, like, to your point, I think, like, eventually I think those people will come on board, but that's not like who we're targeting.
We think eventually their employees will force them to come on board by choosing where they work. And there are plenty of forward-thinking leaders that have embraced this, so it's a little, thank you next when they don't get it.
Yeah.
One more question. Is there somebody at the back that just isn't getting visibility? I just want to be, great. Maybe two more. Let's do one more right here. Great.
A lot of your data reference to people that have used your service. But the people that have not used it, did you find that the branding randomly actually reinforced the negative for a lot of the non-users in taking that step to take advantage of your service? That it somehow implies you have to be exceptionally brave to use it. Like, having your data that you're sharing with users, doesn't that skew somewhat? What about the non-user, and why did they use it? Is your brand name part of that?
It's a great problem. When we first came up with the name, which we love,
The woman sitting next to you came up with it, so you can blame her.
Yeah.
Sorry, Maddie.
Actually, somebody challenged me with that same thing. It feels like you have to be brave to use it. We thought that it was about the kind of, it suggests the kind of behavior that we want to drive. It suggests the kind of organizations that we work with who are brave and forward thinking and really attuned to the needs of their people, even if it feels like a hard step sometimes. So we think it captures the ethos of what we're trying to build. I don't think we know specifically if that is a barrier to utilization. We've been super happy with what we've seen so far. We launched a company yesterday that had 700 people on SF, 6% of their people scheduled a session the first day of launch. So it was crazy. And in seeing that level of utilization, I think we're doing a great job at telling the story of like what this is and how it can be valuable. But it's a great thing for us to pay attention to. So. Yes, we'll be here. So any questions we didn't get to? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.